The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic music, no slow-motion moment where the world tilts on its axis. It comes wrapped in ordinary moments. A hand on your shoulder, the smell of grilled burgers, the clink of ice in a plastic cup. The Prestons' annual block party was in full swing when Derek Walsh sidled up to me at the drinks table. Mid-40s, recently divorced, and about 3 beers past his limit. I'd known Derek for 6 years. Decent enough guy, worked in pharmaceutical sales, had a habit of talking too loud when he drank. "Nathan, my man," he said, throwing his arm around my shoulder. His breath was warm and hoppy against my ear. "You know what? You're a real saint for forgiving her. I couldn't have done it. Not after everything." I was mid-pour on a gin and tonic. The bottle hovered over the cup. Forgiven her for what? The color drained from Derek's face so fast I thought he might pass out. His arm slid off my shoulder like I'd suddenly become radioactive. It was a joke, forget it. He was already backing away, his eyes darting around the yard like a cornered animal looking for an exit. "Forget I said anything, okay? Stupid joke." He practically ran. I watched him weave through the crowd, watched him make a beeline for my wife. Allison was standing near the dessert table, laughing at something Diane Preston had said. She looked beautiful in a sundress I didn't remember buying, her hair loose around her shoulders the way I'd always loved it. Derek grabbed her elbow, leaned in close, whispered something urgent. I saw her body stiffen, saw her head snap toward me. Our eyes met across 30 feet of suburban paradise, the string lights, the kids running with sparklers, the neighbors chatting about property values and school districts. Her face didn't show confusion. It didn't show, "What is that drunk idiot talking about?" It showed fear, and in that single moment, standing there with gin dripping over my fingers, I understood 2 things with absolute clarity. My wife had a secret, and everyone at this party knew it except me. I set down the bottle, wiped my hand on my khakis, watched Derek and Allison have a brief, intense conversation that ended with her touching his arm in what I now recognized as a plea for silence. Then she glanced at me again, manufactured a smile, and started walking over. "Hey, honey," she kissed my cheek, the same kiss she'd given me for 14 years. "Derek's really had too much tonight. I think Lisa's going to have to drive him home." "What did he mean?" "What?" "About forgiving you." "What did he mean?" She laughed. It was almost convincing. "You know Derek. He's been weird since the divorce. I think he's projecting his own marriage issues onto everyone else's." I let it hang there. Didn't push, didn't argue. Just watched her face while she spun a lie as casually as breathing. "Should we head out?" she asked. "I'm pretty tired." "Sure." We said our goodbyes. I shook hands, kissed cheeks, promised to have people over soon. The whole time I cataloged every interaction differently. The way Diane Preston held my hand a beat too long. The way Tom Richardson clapped my shoulder with a bit too much sympathy. The way Grant Ellis, my best friend of 15 years, wouldn't quite meet my eyes when we hugged goodbye. They all knew. Every single one of them. The drive home was 7 minutes of silence thick enough to choke on. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady at 10 and 2. Allison sat rigid in the passenger seat, her phone clutched in her lap like a lifeline. "So," I said, my voice impressively casual, "what was Derek going on about?" "Derek's drunk." The words came too fast, too smooth. "He's been weird since his divorce. You know how he gets." I nodded slowly. "Right. The divorce." She had the excuse loaded and ready, pre-chambered, waiting. I pulled into our driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment looking at the house we'd bought together 12 years ago. Colonial revival, 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, the American dream in brick and mortar. The house where we'd brought Ethan home from the hospital. The house where I'd built the deck, painted the nursery, installed the crown molding she'd wanted in the dining room. "Coming in?" Allison asked, already opening her door. "In a minute." I watched her walk inside, watched the kitchen light flick on, and I sat there in the dark, running an inventory I should have taken months ago. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay on my side of the bed. We'd developed sides somewhere along the way, hadn't we? And cataloged the last 18 months of my marriage like an architect reviewing blueprints for structural failure. The work trips that started appearing on her calendar. Minneapolis, Atlanta, Chicago. She'd never traveled this much before. Marketing directors traveled, sure, but she'd been in her position for 8 years and suddenly needed to attend twice as many conferences. The gym membership. Allison had always said she hated gyms. Sweating in public surrounded by strangers. Gross, were her exact words. But suddenly she was going 4 times a week. Coming home flushed and energized and heading straight for the shower. I'd complimented her on her dedication. She'd smiled and said she was doing it for herself. The phone. God, the phone. It went everywhere now. To the bathroom. To bed. Face down on every surface, screen locked with a passcode she'd never needed before. When I asked about it once, she'd said there was sensitive work information, and her company had new security protocols. I believed her because why wouldn't I? The intimacy patterns. She'd stopped reaching for me around the time the trip started. Then, 4 months later, she became enthusiastic again, almost performative, trying new things, initiating when she never had before. I'd thought maybe we were reconnecting. Maybe the dry spell was over. Now I wondered if guilt had a particular rhythm. And then there was Christmas. My mother, her hand on my arm, that soft look in her eyes. "I'm proud of how you're handling things, honey." I'd assumed she meant work. The Harrison project had been brutal. 80-hour weeks, a client who kept changing specifications, a deadline that felt like a gun to my head. But my mother hadn't asked about work that day. "Handling what things, Mom?" She'd patted my cheek. "You're a good man, Nathan. Remember that." My mother knew. My own mother knew something about my marriage that I didn't. I turned over and looked at Allison's sleeping form. She was facing away from me, her breathing steady and peaceful. Who were you, I thought, while I was falling asleep next to a stranger? 3 days later, I met Grant Ellis for our regular Thursday racquetball game. Grant had been my best friend for 15 years. We'd met at a young professionals mixer back when we were both hungry 20-somethings, trying to make it in Charlotte. He'd been wearing a terrible tie and complaining about his new position at Merrill Lynch. I'd been fresh out of architecture school and intimidated by everyone in the room. We'd bonded over our mutual discomfort and ended up closing the bar down. Over the years, Grant became the brother I never had. He'd become a successful financial advisor. I'd become an architect. And somewhere along the way, we'd become the kind of friends who knew each other's ATM pins and had standing permission to walk into each other's houses unannounced. I'd been the best man at his wedding. He'd been at the hospital when Ethan was born. We played hard for 40 minutes, then sat on the bench catching our breath. The court echoed with the sounds of other games, rubber squeaking on hardwood. "Hey," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Weird thing happened at the Prestons' party." Grant took a long pull from his water bottle. "Yeah?" Derek Walsh came up to me, said something about forgiving Allison, asked what he meant, and he practically ran away. The pause was a beat too long. I watched Grant's profile, watched the micro-expressions flicker across his face like a stock ticker. The slight tightening around his eyes. The way his jaw set before relaxing into forced casualness. "Derek says stupid stuff when he drinks," Grant said finally. "You know how he is." "What did he mean, though?" Grant stood up, grabbed his racket. "Honestly, no idea. You should ask Allison." He couldn't meet my eyes. I'd seen Grant lie before, to clients who asked if their portfolios were performing well during market crashes, to his mother about why he couldn't make it to Easter dinner. Grant was a decent liar when he needed to be, but not to me. Never to me. Until now. "Ready for another game?" he asked, already walking toward the court. I followed him. But something had shifted. The ground beneath my feet wasn't quite solid anymore. Saturday morning, Ethan's soccer game at the rec complex. I'd been helping coach his team for 3 years. Nothing official, just running drills, being present. Ethan was 12 now, all gangly limbs and sudden mood swings, but he still lit up when he scored a goal and looked to the sidelines to make sure I'd seen it. His smile in those moments was everything I'd ever wanted from fatherhood. I stationed myself near the other parents, coffee in hand, and paid attention in a way I never had before. Sarah and Michelle, two of the team moms, were chatting near the bleachers. Nice enough women. We'd been to dinner parties together, exchanged Christmas cards, endured dozens of these Saturday morning games in each other's company. I approached casually and they stopped talking mid-sentence. The silence was sudden and awkward. "Morning," I said. "Beautiful day for a game." "Beautiful," Sarah agreed, her smile too bright. "How are you, Nathan? How are things?" The way she said "things" told me everything. It was the same tone you'd use to ask someone about their cancer diagnosis. "Things are good." I watched her face. "Why do you ask?" "No reason, just making conversation." Michelle suddenly needed to find a restroom. Sarah discovered an urgent text on her phone. I stood there alone, watching them retreat. I moved through the morning like a ghost, paying attention now. Really paying attention. Tom Richardson, whose son played defense, gave me a look as I passed. It wasn't hostile. It was worse. It was pity. The Jeffersons, sitting 3 rows up, stopped whispering when I got close. They smiled too hard, asked about my work, changed the subject when I mentioned Allison. Near the concession stand, I caught a fragment of conversation. "Don't know how he hasn't figured it out." Silence when they saw me. The scope of it hit me like a blow to the chest. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't gossip that a few people had heard. This was common knowledge, a community secret that everyone had kept from me while looking me in the eye, shaking my hand, wishing me Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. How long? How many barbecues, birthday parties, neighborhood gatherings had I attended as the oblivious clown, the fool who didn't know? How many sympathetic glances had I missed? How many careful subject changes? How many times had people stopped talking when I walked into a room? I watched Ethan score a goal and throw his arms up in celebration, scanning the sidelines until he found me. I cheered. I gave him a thumbs up. And I felt something cold and precise settle into my chest. I made a decision. I would not confront Allison. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. Every detail, every lie, every person who had chosen to keep me in the dark. I became an actor in my own life. "Morning, babe." I'd kiss her cheek before leaving for work. "How was your day?" I'd ask over dinner, genuinely interested in her answers. "You look tired. Everything okay at the office?" The concerned husband routine, perfected over 2 weeks of practice. She bought it completely. Why wouldn't she? I'd been buying her act for months, years maybe. I just never thought to check the receipt. But at night, after she fell asleep, I worked. I'm an architect. My job is details, measurements, specifications, structural integrity. I look at a building and see all the ways it could fail, all the stress points and load-bearing weaknesses. A hairline crack in a foundation can bring down an entire structure if you don't catch it early. I turned those skills on my marriage. First, the digital forensics. We had a shared cloud storage account, one of those family plans we'd set up years ago for photos and documents. I logged in and checked the recently deleted folder. Photos. Deleted but not permanently erased. Allison at a restaurant I didn't recognize. Upscale, candlelit, definitely not the kind of place you'd go for a work dinner. She was smiling at whoever held the camera, her face soft in a way I hadn't seen in months. Most of the photos were carefully cropped. But one wasn't. A man's hand on the table. A wedding ring on his finger. The other man was married too. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the screen harsh in the dark room. I'd expected it, but expecting and knowing are different animals entirely. Suspecting your wife is unfaithful is an abstract wound. Seeing photographic evidence turns it concrete, permanent, real. Next, the credit card statements. I pulled up 18 months of records and started cross-referencing. There. A hotel charge in Atlanta. The same week she'd claimed to have client meetings. A Hilton downtown, $245 a night. Why would she need a hotel if she was in meetings all day and flying home at night? She'd said she was staying with her college friend Rachel. I checked the next trip. Chicago. Another hotel. Another night she'd supposedly spent at a conference with no overnight accommodations. The week after that, Nashville. She'd told me she was visiting her sister. Her sister lived in Nashville. But there was a charge at the Hermitage Hotel for 2 nights at $300 a night. Why would she need a hotel when her sister had a guest room? I created a spreadsheet. Dates, locations, expenses, her stated reasons for traveling. Column by column, the lies stacked up like bricks. 2 weeks in, I approached Diane Preston. I debated who to go to. Derek was too obvious. He'd already slipped up once and he'd tell Allison immediately. Grant was out for reasons I was only beginning to understand. But Diane Preston was different. She was the neighborhood's moral compass, always volunteering, always organizing, always the first to bring a casserole when someone was sick. If anyone would break rank and tell me the truth, it was her. She was at her community garden plot on a Tuesday afternoon, kneeling in the dirt, carefully transplanting tomato seedlings. The community garden was her sanctuary. 20 raised beds behind the recreation center where she grew vegetables for the local food bank. Nathan. She looked up, surprised. Dirt smudged her gardening gloves. What brings you out here? I need you to tell me the truth. I crouched down to her level, kept my voice low. About Allison. About what everyone seems to know. I watched the conflict play out on her face. The internal debate, the weighing of loyalties. Her eyes darted around to make sure we were alone. Nathan, I don't think I'm the right person. You're exactly the right person, Diane. You're the only person in this neighborhood who still looks me in the eye. She set down her trowel, pulled off her gloves, sat back on her heels and studied me with an expression caught between pity and respect. I told Kevin we should tell you. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I told him months ago, but everyone said it wasn't our place, that marriages are complicated, that maybe you two had some kind of arrangement. We don't have an arrangement. I know. I could tell you didn't know. The way you looked at her at the Christmas party. She stopped, shook her head. You deserved better from all of us. Tell me everything. She did. The affair had been going on for almost 2 years. It was with Tyler Ashford. The name hit me like a physical blow. Tyler Ashford was Grant's older brother. I'd met Tyler dozens of times at family events, Grant's birthday parties, their father's funeral. He was 4 years older than Grant, mid-40s now, silver at the temples, the kind of easy confidence that came from inherited money and early success. He ran Ashford Development Group, a commercial real estate company that had put up half the new buildings in uptown Charlotte. He was married to Brooke Ashford, who— Brooke is in Allison's book club, Diane said, watching my face carefully. They meet every other Wednesday. My wife was sleeping with her friend's husband. Does Brooke know? No. Diane's expression was genuinely pained. She's as in the dark as you were. I've thought about telling her 100 times, but Kevin says it's not our business. He says other people's marriages are complicated, and we don't know the whole story. Grant knows. It wasn't a question, but Diane nodded anyway. He's been covering for Tyler since the beginning, making excuses, providing alibis. Nathan, I'm so sorry. I should have. Don't. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my knees. You're the only person who's told me the truth. That counts for something. I left her there in the garden, surrounded by her careful rows of vegetables, and walked to my car on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Grant. 15 years of friendship. Racquetball games and birthday parties and being there when his dad died. I'd given the eulogy at that funeral. I'd held Grant while he cried and told him his father was proud of him. And for 2 years, he'd sat across from me at bars and watched me talk about my marriage without saying a word. The next phase required a professional. Patricia Lowe's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower uptown, the kind of building that screamed old money and older grudges. She was late 50s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. Her reputation in Charlotte was legendary. She handled the kind of divorces that appeared in the business section rather than the family court docket. Mr. Caldwell. She shook my hand firmly and gestured to a leather chair across from her massive desk. What can I do for you? I told her everything. The party, the discovery, the photos, the credit card statements. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her face giving nothing away. How long have you been married? She asked when I finished. 14 years, 15 in November. Children? One son, Ethan. He's 12. She set down her pen. Here's what you need to understand about North Carolina law. We're a no-fault divorce state. That means adultery doesn't directly affect asset division. Your wife's affair, painful as it is, won't automatically change how property is split. So she just gets half of everything? Not necessarily. Patricia's smile had the sharp edge of a woman who'd spent 30 years in courtrooms. Adultery can affect custody if it impacted the child. Has your wife's affair interfered with her parenting? I thought about it. The nights she was at the gym, the weekends she was at conferences, the gradual withdrawal from Ethan's life that I'd attributed to work stress. Yes, I think it has. Document everything. School pickups, doctor's appointments, homework help, every activity you do with your son that she doesn't. We'll need a pattern. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If marital assets were spent on the affair, hotels, gifts, trips, that's called dissipation of marital assets. North Carolina courts don't look kindly on one spouse spending joint money on an extramarital relationship. It can significantly affect the settlement. I leaned forward. What kind of documentation do you need? Everything. Financial records, travel expenses, anything that shows money going toward the affair. If she bought her lover gifts with joint funds, if she paid for hotels, if she booked flights, all of it matters. I pulled out the spreadsheet I'd created. Dates, expenses, alibis, the truth as I'd been able to piece it together. Patricia's eyebrows rose as she reviewed it. You've been thorough. I'm an architect. Details are what I do. Good. She set the spreadsheet down. One more thing. If you want favorable custody terms, we need to document your role as primary caregiver. Courts default to maintaining the status quo for children. If you've been the primary parent in practice, that helps enormously. I've been doing most of the parenting for the past year, maybe longer. Start keeping a log, dates, times, activities. Don't make it obsessive, just routine documentation, pickups, drop-offs, meals, homework, everything. She leaned forward. Here's the thing about custody cases, Nathan. Judges want to see patterns. They want evidence of investment, A father who shows up for every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every scraped knee. That's powerful. I didn't do any of that thinking about a custody battle. That's exactly what makes it powerful. You did it because you wanted to, because you're a good father. She smiled, and for the first time it seemed warm rather than professional. The courts will see that. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a weight that was somehow lighter than when I'd walked in. For the first time since Derek's slip at the party, I felt like I had a path forward. Not just emotionally, legally, strategically. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I was going to be the architect. Over the next month, I built my case like I was designing a building. Foundation first. I documented everything. Who did school pickups? Me, about 70% of the time. Allison had always said her mornings were too hectic, and I'd adjusted my schedule to accommodate. Who attended parent-teacher conferences? Me, every single one. Allison had missed the last 3 for work emergencies. Who handled doctor's appointments, dentist visits, the emergency room trip when Ethan broke his wrist falling off his skateboard? Me. The night after his cast came off, Ethan and I were in his room, him doing homework while I sat in the beanbag chair that had been there since he was 7. Hey, Dad? Yeah, buddy? Is Mom okay? I looked up from my phone. What do you mean? She just seems, I don't know, distracted. Like she's always somewhere else, even when she's here. He fiddled with his pencil. Did I do something wrong? My heart cracked a little. No, absolutely not. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why doesn't she come to my games anymore? I didn't have an answer for that. Not an honest one. So I did what parents do when the truth would cause more harm than silence. I deflected. She's just going through a busy time at work. It's not about you, I promise. He nodded, but I could see he didn't quite believe me. Kids know. They always know when something's wrong, even if they can't name it. Hey, I said. How about this weekend, you and me? We go to the batting cages. Maybe grab pizza after. His face lit up. Really? Really? That moment, that simple moment of my son's face brightening because I wanted to spend time with him, that was worth more than anything Allison could have offered me. I'd never thought about it in these terms before. I was just being a dad, doing what needed to be done. But the pattern was clear. Allison had been checking out of parenting for the better part of a year, and I'd been so busy covering for her absences that I hadn't stopped to wonder why. Then the evidence. I found the jewelry store charges buried in an old credit card statement. $4,000 over 6 months at a boutique in South Park. One of those upscale places where everything was displayed on velvet and the salespeople knew your name. I knew every piece of jewelry Allison owned. None of it was new. She'd been buying gifts. For him. I set up a voice-activated recorder in the home office. Patricia had confirmed it was legal. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, and if I was in my own home, anything recorded was admissible. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I'd told Allison I was going to the gym, but I'd parked down the street and walked back. Sat in the living room in the dark, barely breathing, while she paced in the office 15 feet away. He doesn't suspect anything. Her voice muffled through the office door, but clear enough. I know, baby, I know. No, the party was fine. Derek was just drunk and stupid. I handled it. A pause. She laughed at something he said. Once the kids are older, we can figure it out. I know, I want that too. No, Brooke won't find out. She never goes through your stuff. She's too trusting. Another pause. Her voice dropped lower. I miss you. I hate pretending. Soon, okay? I promise. We just have to be patient. The kids. Not once Ethan is older. The kids. She was already thinking about Tyler's children and her future. I listened to the whole conversation, 37 minutes of casual intimacy, comfortable rhythm, two people who had done this many times. The way she laughed at his jokes, the way she said his name, the way she sounded happier talking to him than she had talking to me in months. I walked back to my car and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. The Ashford development project came up 2 weeks later. My firm, Carter and Associates, had been pursuing a major mixed-use development downtown, a $40 million contract for a retail and residential complex that would transform 3 city blocks. We'd been competing against 2 other firms for 6 months, refining our proposals, working weekends to perfect our presentation. The developer was Ashford Development Group. I'd known this in the abstract. Tyler's company was one of the biggest players in Charlotte real estate, but it hadn't fully registered until William Carter, our senior partner, pulled me into his office. "Nathan, I want you to lead the presentation next week." "The Ashford presentation?" "You're our best. This is the biggest contract we've chased in 5 years. I need your A-game." I thought about Tyler Ashford. His handshake, his smile, his comfortable assumption that no one would ever call him to account. "I'm in," I said. The conference room was all glass and chrome, the kind of space designed to make you feel like money was being made just by sitting there. Tyler sat at the head of the table, flanked by his development team. 5 people in expensive suits hanging on his every word. He was everything I expected. Confident, charming, silver at the temples in a way that read distinguished rather than aging. The kind of man who'd never heard the word no, and probably wouldn't recognize it if he did. "Nathan." He stood to shake my hand. His grip was firm, practiced. "Great to finally work together. Allison's told me a lot about you." "I bet she has." "All good things, I hope?" I matched his smile watt for watt. 2 professionals playing a game only one of us knew we were playing. "I've heard great things about your work too. The Riverside project was impressive." "Thanks. That one was a labor of love." I wondered if he used the same phrase with my wife. The presentation went flawlessly. I walked them through our design, fielded questions, handled concerns with the confidence of a man who'd been doing this for 15 years. I showed them the pedestrian corridors, the green spaces, the way natural light would flood the central atrium. Tyler nodded along, asked smart questions, made notes on his legal pad. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Tyler stood and began to clap, slowly, the others joining in. "Excellent work. Truly excellent." He shook my hand again. "I think we're going to have a great partnership." He leaned in slightly, confidential. "We should grab dinner sometime. Our wives keep saying we should all get together." You know how they are. Our wives. Like they were interchangeable. Like they belong to us. "That sounds great." I didn't blink. "Let's plan something." The self-control required was immense. Every fiber of my being wanted to put my fist through his perfect teeth. But I held. 2 days later, William called me into his office again, grinning like a kid on Christmas. "We got it. The Ashford contract is ours." Tyler and I would be working together for the next 18 months. He thought he'd won. He had no idea he'd just walked into a trap. The months that followed were an exercise in controlled demolition. I built trust with Tyler. Lunches at upscale restaurants where he picked up the check. Site visits where we walked the lot and talked about vision and legacy. Long meetings where he talked about his business, his plans, his frustrations. He let his guard down around me the way people do when they think they have nothing to fear. "The financing has been tricky," he admitted over drinks one evening. We were at a whiskey bar downtown, the kind of place where the bartender knew everyone's name and the bottles cost more than dinner. "We're leveraged pretty heavy on this one. Took on more debt than I'd like to fund the acquisition." "But you've got solid backers, right?" Tyler swirled his whiskey. "My father-in-law's been patient, but patience has limits, you know. He put in a lot of the seed money when I started the company. Family investment. Brooke's family money is in the business? Silent partner, he shrugged. It's complicated. But if this project comes in on time and on budget, everything opens up. We'll be able to move on 3 more developments by next year. This is the one that takes us to the next level. I filed that away. Tyler's company was leveraged. His father-in-law's investment was keeping him afloat. If that investment disappeared, the whole house of cards would collapse. Must be stressful, I said, keeping my voice sympathetic. Having that kind of pressure. You have no idea. Tyler finished his whiskey, signaled for another. Brooke doesn't really understand it. She grew up with money. She doesn't get what it's like to lie awake at night worrying about payroll, about loans, about whether one bad quarter could wipe out everything you've built. Sounds lonely. It is. He looked at me with something like gratitude. It's nice having someone who gets it, you know? Allison. He caught himself, cleared his throat. I mean, business stuff. It's hard to talk about with people who aren't in it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered him saying, our wives, like they were interchangeable accessories, and the feeling passed. Well, I said, clinking my glass against his, here's to the project keeping us both out of that kind of trouble. I'll drink to that. 3 weeks later, I was at the site with Tyler when he took a call. He stepped away, but not far enough. I caught fragments. Told you not to call me here. I know, I miss you too. No, Brooke's at her mother's this weekend. I can get away tomorrow night. He hung up, turned back to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sorry about that. Client issue. No problem, I said. Happens to all of us. I continued the racquetball games with Grant. Every Thursday, same as always. But now I watched him the way you watch a stranger. Allison and I have been talking about renewing our vows, I mentioned casually after a game, toweling off sweat. For our 15th anniversary. Grant fumbled his water bottle. Just for a moment, but I saw it. That sounds nice, he managed. Really nice. Yeah, things have been great between us lately. I feel like we're more connected than we've been in years. Grant couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, at his shoes, anywhere but at me. I'm happy for you, man, he said. You two deserve it. The lie was so obvious it was almost insulting. 15 years of friendship, and he couldn't even pretend convincingly anymore. I wrestled with Brooke. Not literally, metaphorically, ethically. Did I tell her? When did I tell her? How? She was innocent in this. Another person being deceived by the people who claim to love her? Did she deserve to continue living a lie? Did I have the right to detonate her life? I started manufacturing run-ins. The coffee shop near her yoga studio. I discovered her schedule through careful questions at neighborhood events. The grocery store on Saturday mornings. Casual conversations where I planted seeds. Tyler must work insane hours with that new development, I said one day over lattes. I feel like I never see Allison anymore between her work trips and my project. How do you two handle it? Brooke was pretty in an understated way. Brown hair, warm eyes, the kind of face that radiated genuine kindness. She stirred her drink, untroubled by my question. Tyler's always been good about being home. He says family comes first. She believed it. Completely. That's nice, I said. He seems like a solid guy. He really is. I'm lucky. I felt a genuine pang of sympathy. Brooke wasn't a player in this. She was collateral damage. A woman living a lie she hadn't chosen, surrounded by people who had decided she didn't deserve the truth. I would tell her. But timing mattered. The neighborhood charity gala was scheduled for June. Black tie, silent auction, the whole social circle dressed to impress at the Quail Hollow Country Club. Both couples would be there. Grant and his wife, the Prestons, everyone who had watched my humiliation unfold and said nothing. 2 days before the event, I called Patricia. File the papers. Are you sure? Her voice was careful. Once we serve her, you can't unring that bell. The element of surprise will be gone. I'm sure. And you want her served at work? Yes. At her office. On Thursday. Allison was served at her office at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I know because I was watching the clock when her call came through. Nathan. Her voice was shaking. Nathan, what is this? What are you doing? I'll be home at 6. We can talk then. I hung up. She was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in. Her eyes were red, mascara smeared. The divorce papers spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. For one brief moment, I felt something like pity. Then I remembered every lie. Every night she'd come home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine and pretended she'd been at the gym. Every time she'd kissed me goodbye and driven straight to a hotel. Every moment I'd spent as the fool in a play everyone else knew the ending to. The pity evaporated. Nathan, we can work through this. She moved toward me, hands outstretched, face crumbling. It didn't mean anything. Don't. My voice was ice, cold enough to freeze both of us where we stood. Don't lie to me anymore. I know about Tyler. I know it's been 2 years. I know about the hotels, the jewelry you bought him with our money, the trips you took while pretending to be at work conferences. I know what you said on the phone about when the kids are older. I know everything. She stared at me. I watched her cycle through options, deny harder, get angry, try tears, before settling on the last resort. How long have you known? Long enough? Nathan, She was crying now, real tears streaking through her makeup. I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake, A mistake happens once. I stepped back, putting distance between us. You slept with him for 2 years. You spent our money on hotels for 2 years. You lied to my face every single day for 2 years. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. Thousands of decisions. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers like they might spontaneously combust. Does he know? Tyler? Not yet. Her head snapped up. What does that mean? It means the gala is in 2 days. You have a choice. You can stay home and start dealing with reality, or you can go and pretend everything's fine. But I'm going, and I'm done pretending. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, crying over documents she'd created the need for. The gala was everything I expected. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, the cream of Charlotte's suburban professional class mingling with champagne flutes and auction paddles. The country club had outdone itself. Ice sculptures, string quartet, floral arrangements that cost more than most people's car payments. I walked in alone. Allison had stayed home, too terrified of what I might do to risk appearing. She should have been terrified. I moved through the crowd, accepting condolences I hadn't asked for, reading the room like a blueprint. Word had spread, as it does. The divorce filing was public record and someone had noticed. Whispers followed me like perfume. Nathan, how are you holding up? Tom Richardson cornered me near the champagne fountain, his wife hovering anxiously nearby. Fine, Tom. Thanks for asking. If there's anything we can do, there isn't, but I appreciate the offer. His wife pulled him away with a pointed look. I watched them huddle with another couple, heads together, glancing back at me. The social ecosystem was already recalibrating, deciding who to align with, whose side to take. I spotted Sarah and Michelle from the soccer games. They saw me too, and for a moment I thought they might come over. Instead, they suddenly became very interested in the silent auction items. Cowards. All of them. The Prestons found me near the bar. Diane looked genuinely pained. Kevin looked uncomfortable. Nathan, we're so sorry about how everything... Don't be. I sipped my scotch. It's over now. That's what matters. If we'd known you didn't know, you did know I didn't know. Everyone knew I didn't know. That's kind of the point. Kevin opened his mouth, closed it again. Diane put her hand on his arm. We made a mistake, she said quietly. I made a mistake. I should have told you sooner. You're the only person who told me at all. That's worth something. They moved on. I scanned the room, spotted Brooke near the silent auction tables, elegant in a blue dress, examining a weekend getaway package. Tyler was across the room, working a group of investors, his laugh carrying over the string quartet. Brooke. I touched her arm lightly. Can we step outside for a minute? There's something you need to know, and I'm sorry I have to be the one to tell you. Her face went through confusion, concern, and finally a flicker of dread. The instinctive recognition that something terrible was coming. We found a quiet corner of the terrace. The evening was warm, the sounds of the party muffled behind us, the golf course spreading out in manicured perfection under the setting sun. Nathan, you're scaring me. What's going on? Your husband and my wife have been having an affair for the past 2 years. She didn't say anything. I watched her face, watched the words land like physical blows. Her hand found the terrace railing, gripped it. I have proof. Financial records, photos, recordings. I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth. The same truth that everyone in there, I gestured toward the glowing windows, has kept from both of us. Everyone knew? Her voice was barely a whisper. Most of them. Grant's been covering for Tyler since the beginning. I pulled out my phone, showed her just enough to be undeniable. A photo of Allison and Tyler at a restaurant, his hand on hers. A credit card statement for a hotel room on a night Brooke thought Tyler was at a business dinner. The audio clip. I played just a few seconds, enough to hear Allison's voice say, Brooke won't find out. She's too trusting. Brooke listened, looked, and something behind her eyes went very, very still. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough to make sure I had proof. I thought you deserved to know. What you do with it is your choice. She nodded slowly. Then she straightened her spine, smoothed her dress, and walked back into the gala with the composure of a woman who had just decided exactly how her story would end. I followed at a distance. Tyler was still working the room, oblivious, shaking hands and making promises. I watched Brooke approach him, touch his arm, lean in close. Her face was perfectly composed. His face went through confusion, recognition, terror. We're leaving. Now. They walked out together, Brooke's hand on his elbow like a vice. From across the room, Grant watched them go. His brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes found me, standing alone by the bar with a glass of scotch. Our gazes locked. I watched the realization dawn. Watched him understand exactly what had just happened, exactly what I knew, exactly what our 15-year friendship had become. I raised my glass slightly. A toast. A goodbye. Then I walked out into the night. The fallout was spectacular. Brooke didn't just file for divorce. She called her family's lawyers, the same lawyers who had drawn up the partnership agreements that tied the family money to Tyler's business. The Morgenthalers were old Charlotte money, the kind of family that had buildings named after them and opinions that mattered in every boardroom that counted. Within a week, the investment community knew. Charlotte's business circles aren't large, and gossip travels at the speed of self-interest. I heard about it from William at work. A client had mentioned it casually, assuming everyone already knew. Tyler Ashford's having some personal issues, William said, frowning at his computer. Something about his wife's family pulling their investment. You know anything about that? Nothing specific, I said. Which was technically true. Within 2 weeks, partners were distancing themselves. Deals were falling through, phones weren't being returned. The development community was small enough that reputation was everything. Tyler had built his on being a family man, a trustworthy partner, a guy whose handshake meant something. That reputation was in ashes now. I ran into him at a business lunch about a month after the gala. He was sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a drink, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. I watched a former colleague spot him, make brief eye contact, and very deliberately choose a table on the other side of the restaurant. Tyler Ashford, the golden boy, the charming deal-maker whose handshake was as good as a contract. Suddenly, he was radioactive. The project with my firm continued. Tyler couldn't afford to lose it. It was the only thing keeping his company afloat. But now he had to work with me, attend meetings with me, sit across conference tables from me, knowing that I had dismantled his carefully constructed life. The power dynamic had completely inverted. Our project meetings became exercises in barely concealed tension. Tyler showed up prepared, professional, but diminished. The swagger was gone. The easy charm had curdled into something desperate. One afternoon, after a particularly tense meeting about construction delays, Tyler asked me to stay behind. "Nathan." He waited until the room had cleared, until it was just us and the whiteboard covered in timelines and budget projections. "I need to ask you something." "Shoot." "Did you plan this? All of it?" He gestured vaguely, encompassing the room, the project, the wreckage of his life. "Getting assigned to this project, getting close to me, the gala. Was it all calculated?" I considered lying. Considered some diplomatic deflection that would keep the working relationship functional. Then I decided he didn't deserve diplomatic anymore. "Some of it, not all of it." I leaned back in my chair. Getting assigned to the project was luck. Everything else? That was me recognizing an opportunity and taking it. "You destroyed my marriage." "No, you destroyed your marriage. I just made sure your wife knew about it." He flinched like I'd hit him. "Brooke and I, we could have worked it out. If she'd found out some other way, if there had been time to explain." "Explain what? 2 years of lying? 2 years of sneaking around with my wife while you smiled at Brooke across the dinner table?" I shook my head. "There's no version of this story where you're the victim, Tyler." "I loved Allison." "You loved what Allison made you feel. That's different." I stood up, gathered my papers. "We've got 18 months of this project left. I suggest we keep it professional." "And if I can't do that? If I pull the contract?" "Then your company collapses 3 months sooner than it's already going to. Your call." I left him there, alone in the conference room, surrounded by blueprints for a building that might be the last thing he ever built. "Nathan." He caught me in the hallway after a project meeting, his voice low and strained. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Shadows under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, the suit not quite sitting right anymore. "Can we talk?" "About what? The East Wing timeline?" "I think we're on track." "You know what I mean?" I turned to face him fully. "I know exactly what you mean. And there's nothing to talk about. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." "I loved her." His voice cracked. "I know that doesn't excuse it, but no." I shook my head. "You wanted her. That's not the same thing. If you'd loved her, you wouldn't have made her a liar. You wouldn't have put her in a position where she had to lie to her son every day. But you didn't think about that, did you? You didn't think about Ethan, or about Brooke, or about anyone but yourself." I left him standing there. My divorce was methodical. Patricia was magnificent, with documented evidence of financial dissipation. The hotels, the jewelry, the trips funded with marital assets, and a clear record of my role as primary caregiver. The settlement heavily favored me. The mediation was brutal. Allison's lawyer tried to paint me as cold, calculating, a man who had planned the destruction of his marriage like a military campaign. I sat quietly while Patricia dismantled every argument with surgical precision. "Your client spent approximately $18,000 of marital assets on hotels for extramarital encounters. Patricia said calmly, sliding a spreadsheet across the table. She purchased $4,000 in jewelry that she gave to her affair partner. She took trips under false pretenses, using joint funds. Those expenses were related to work travel. We have credit card statements showing otherwise. We have recordings of Mrs. Caldwell discussing these trips with her affair partner. Patricia smiled. Shall I play them? Allison's lawyer blanched. They hadn't known about the recordings. We're prepared to settle, Patricia continued. Mr. Caldwell keeps the house. Primary custody of Ethan goes to Mr. Caldwell, with standard visitation for Mrs. Caldwell. Retirement accounts are split, minus dissipation offsets. That's not fair? Patricia raised an eyebrow. Your client had an affair for 2 years. She spent marital funds on that affair. She has documented patterns of reduced parental involvement. North Carolina courts take all of these factors seriously. Allison was crying. I felt nothing. I kept the house. Retirement accounts were split, but the dissipation claims offset much of what Allison would have received. Primary custody of Ethan went to me, with standard visitation for Allison. The day we signed the final papers, in a conference room that smelled like leather and finality, Allison looked at me across the table. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. That's almost worse. You didn't even care enough to mean it. I withdrew from the social circle gradually, cleanly, without drama. People tried to talk to me. At the grocery store, at the gas station, at Ethan's school events. The same people who had watched me be humiliated for 2 years now wanted to explain themselves, to justify their silence, to be absolved. I wasn't in the absolution business. Grant tried to reach out first. Texts that started apologetic and turned pleading. Voicemails that rambled about complicated situations and impossible choices. An email that went on for 3 paragraphs about how family loyalty had tied his hands. Nathan, please, you have to understand, one voicemail said. Tyler's my brother. My blood. What was I supposed to do? Betray my own family? I listened to that message 3 times. Each time I heard the same thing. Grant had chosen. When forced to pick between 15 years of friendship and covering for his brother's adultery, he'd picked his brother. That was his right. But it was also my right to end the friendship over it. I responded once. You lied to my face for 2 years. You chose your brother over 15 years of friendship. I'm not angry anymore, but we're done. He didn't try again. Derek Walsh showed up at my door with a bottle of expensive whiskey and eyes full of remorse. I almost told you that night. I was going to tell you. And then I looked at Allison's face and I chickened out. I know. Can you forgive me? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Derek wasn't a villain. He was just weak. A man who'd stumbled into knowledge he didn't want and made the coward's choice. I understand why you didn't tell me. I do. But every time I look at you, I'll remember that you knew. I'll remember that moment at the party when you could have said more and didn't. That's not your fault exactly, but it's not something I can get past either. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. He left the whiskey. I donated it to a charity auction. 3 months after the divorce was final, Allison came to see me. She looked different. Thinner, tired, the polish worn away. She and Tyler had gone public, but the fairy tale wasn't playing out the way she'd imagined. Turns out, relationships born in secrecy and fantasy don't always survive in daylight. Tyler's having financial problems, she said, perched on the edge of the couch that now belonged entirely to me. His wife's family is pulling their investment. He might lose the company. Why are you telling me this? Because if his company fails, the project fails. Your firm loses the contract. I almost laughed. Almost. So you're asking me to help Tyler, to save his business? I leaned forward. For you. She had the grace to look ashamed. I know I don't have any right to ask. You don't. But I'm asking anyway, not for me, for him. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the street where we'd lived as a family for 12 years. The house across the street had new owners now. Young couple, baby on the way. Fresh start, clean slate. I'm not going to sabotage the project, I said finally. That would hurt too many people who had nothing to do with this. But I'm not going to save Tyler either. He made his choices. So did you. And I'm done cleaning up your messes. She left without another word. Tyler's company survived. Barely. He found other investors, restructured the debt, limped across the finish line on our project. But his reputation was permanently damaged. The Golden Boy was tarnished now, whispered about at industry events, passed over for deals he would have landed easily 2 years ago. He and Allison stayed together. At least they were together last I heard. But the relationship didn't fare as well in the harsh light of reality. Financial stress, custody complications, the constant awareness that each had proven capable of fundamental betrayal. I didn't follow their story closely. I had my own to write. A year later, I was at a dinner party. New friends, people from work, people I'd met in the months since my life fell apart and came back together. The conversation turned to relationships, to second chances, to the strange paths life takes. Someone mentioned they'd heard about what happened with my marriage. I'm sorry you went through that. I spent 2 years being lied to, I said. Everyone I knew participated in that lie, either through action or silence. The only thing I could control was how I responded. I chose to respond on my terms, at a time of my choosing, in a way that protected what mattered most to me, my son and my self-respect. That's remarkably level-headed. It wasn't at first. At first I wanted to burn everything down, but I'm an architect. I build things. Even when I'm tearing something down, I do it with precision. Later that night, I drove home, to a house that was mine, to a life that was mine, to a future I was building myself. The last to know. First, to decide how it ended. The end.